Deep in the burning dunes of Giza is a secret so ghastly that archaeologists have been decades in trying to figure out why Pharaoh Khafre's Khafre frightens them. The finding of enigmatic stone monuments in the sand implies the Egyptians had actually been much more clever than anyone had ever thought. What they discovered about Khafre's methods, his achievements, and the secret passageways connecting to the Sphinx has shaken our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. It is believed this could have been one of the largest cities in the world in the 3rd millennium BC. Yet the question lingers, where was it and where was all the infrastructure? The facts point towards Khafre having knowledge and power that are near impossible to achieve in his era. As the enigma unfolds, the tale encourages us to take a leap and find out why Pharaoh Khafre has had archaeologists living in fear, and the solutions are far from comforting. The rock that shouldn't have been was the first indicator that something was seriously amiss with our knowledge of Pharaoh Khafre. It was in 1860 that archaeologist Auguste Mariette unearthed something that continues to haunt the archaeological community today. Buried in Khafre's Valley Temple at Giza, hidden away by centuries of sand and dust, was a statue that didn't belong. The seated statue of Khafre wasn't carved from the surrounding limestone, nor was it crafted from the granite that was typically used to create statues of royalty during this period. Instead, it was cut from anorthosite gneiss, a rare, glowing green rock streaked white with veins that cut through it like ice lightning. The rock had an unearthly appearance, as if glowing within when hit at the proper angles by light. The iridescent nature of the material made the statue appear supernatural in nature and has fascinated all who have witnessed it. But what really frightens archaeologists is not so much how beautiful the stone itself is, but where it is from. Anorthosite does not occur anywhere near Giza. The nearest known source is more than 600 miles away, buried deep in the Nubian desert, to the west of the Second Cataract. This is regarded as one of the most inhospitable and isolated places on the planet. Even in today's geological surveys, it takes a lot of expedition planning, sophisticated equipment, and supply lines just to approach it safely. The statue itself is in the order of tons, so the idea of somehow transporting stones of this magnitude hundreds of miles through desert before even getting it down the Nile to Giza appears in reality to be impossible. With even the equipment available today, cranes, trucks, GPS systems, this logistical impossibility would tax the companies in today's construction. But 4,500 years ago, Khafre's constructors not only found this very rare stone but also moved it over vast distances to create one of the most beautifully crafted statues in the history of mankind. And this achievement by itself indicates that the Egyptians had knowledge and techniques that have never been noted. It is the question that perplexes experts how no one in those days appeared to realize the sheer improbability of the project. The brazenness of trying something so gigantic implies either total faith in their techniques or access to technologies and means never recorded in history. The preference for anorthosite gneiss was not arbitrary. It was specifically used for its symbolic and physical qualities. The green color invoked themes of rebirth and eternal life that were integral to Egyptian religious ideology. Its vast hardness guaranteed that the sculpture would endure millennia nearly unscathed by weathering. And most dramatically of all, the foreign and faraway provenance of the stone communicated a definite political and symbolic message. Pharaoh's hand was felt in the remotest and most unforgiving parts of the known world. This was merely the beginning of a puzzle that would take archaeologists decades to solve. For if Khafre was able to transport such impossible materials, what was he not able to do? The statue, which stands today, is unassailable proof of powers that appear to exceed the capability of any past civilization. Khafre, an Egyptian king of the 4th dynasty, was when the Old Kingdom existed at the absolute pinnacle. His second largest pyramid at Giza remains one of the greatest structures of antiquity, and most think his visage is immortalized in the huge Sphinx. New finds now imply his actual power extended far beyond that of other pharaohs. Archaeological studies have uncovered traces of operations and accomplishments so enormous they shake the very foundations of what we believed ancient Egyptians could accomplish. At Khafre's time, pyramid building was at its height, showing skill in stone cutting, alignment, and planning that would not be equaled for thousands of years. His pyramid's chambers reflect mathematical understanding and engineering skill that would take decades, if not centuries, to develop. History reveals these skills came suddenly and went just as suddenly after his death. His valley temple was only further excavated by archaeologists. The statue found there was not unique, it was one of hundreds of sculptures in a huge program involving hundreds of statues, each crafted from imported exotic stones obtained from the farthest corners of the known world. The magnitude of the project defies imagination. The logistics involved in locating distant quarry sites, mobilizing labor gangs, housing them, feeding them, and supervising them over unimaginable distances, and moving multi-ton blocks across harsh deserts would strain contemporary engineering companies, but Khafre's laborers did it 4,500 years ago. The Valley Temple itself was an achievement. Its building utilized gigantic granite blocks fitted together with millimeter accuracy, without the use of mortar, but they have stayed perfectly in place for millennia, weathering floods, earthquakes, and time itself. Within, archaeologists uncovered a sign of enormous workshops where statues were finished after transport. Tool marks indicate sophisticated understanding of stone properties and methods of cutting and polishing beyond what might be expected from copper or bronze tools. The more experts examined Khafre's projects, the more they began to understand something profoundly disturbing. This wasn't just a pharaoh with vast resources, this was a leader who had control of knowledge and organizational abilities impossible in the era. The planning, the precision, the scope, each hinted at abilities that wouldn't return until the time of the industrial age. And yet, more secrets remained in the desert, where his laborers once had worked under conditions that should have killed them. Trailing after the stone took archaeologists into one of the world's most unforgiving deserts. The quarry works yielded signs of activity that they shouldn't have been able to do. Partially exposed worked stone blocks sat in sand, bearing tool marks of unprecedented precision. Some were already pre-shaped to precise dimensions prior to transport, which suggests foresight and planning as out of place as the activity itself. The bronze tools discovered there were unlike any Egyptian designs so far, obviously made for use with anorthosite gneiss specifically. The pottery fragments, with Khafre's cartouche, provided evidence that organized groups labored at these quarries for years, not short-term expeditions. Alarming was that the pottery showed mass production methods, suggesting a type of industrial-scale operations. Even more astonishing, permanent buildings were discovered, engineered shelters built for sustenance in the harsh desert environment, with storage rooms filled with preserved water and food. Worker burials, with ritual and grave offerings, verified that priests had ventured to such barren quarries. The most astonishing revelation of all came in the form of bizarre stone ramps cut into the desert floor. These ramps were unlike anything seen from Egyptian times. Flat ways for sledges were not what they held, instead, deep parallel grooves, accurate and uniform across large lengths. The engineering of the grooves indicated that they were made specifically for some type of transport system, something which cannot be explained by archaeologists. Old descriptions of huge statues being pulled by hundreds of workers with sledges and water cannot explain what was discovered. There was no sign of the vast workforces such techniques would entail. Rather, the immaculately smoothed grooves, mass-produced over miles, imply a much more sophisticated and effective system. Still more strangely, the ramps themselves were constructed with drainage systems, ideal gradients, and bracing structures to stop them from collapsing. These are engineering concepts not formally recorded for another 2,000 years. The ramps also bridged seas and waterways that emptied into the Nile, suggesting an interwoven land and sea transport system advanced enough to compete with contemporary shipping networks. The level of coordination to coordinate such undertakings is mind-boggling, proof of coordinating technology and centralized organization that has no space within our recorded history. The uncomfortable reality that unfolds is that Pharaoh Khafre's society had developed sophisticated engineering and organizational skills lost to the annals of history. The evidence compels archaeologists to be faced with the risk that human technological evolution has not been a consistent, linear process, but may hold in it abandoned peaks of knowledge and power. Environmental secrets. Environmental evidence adds another twist to Khafre's impossible accomplishments that leaves archaeologists thoroughly unsettled. Weather records from 4,500 years ago indicate that the area surrounding the site of the quarry was quite different from the desolate desert landscape of the present day. These conditions render Khafre's activities all the more impressive and appalling. In Khafre's time, seasonal water resources were available where sand is seen today. Paleoclimatic studies show the Sahara went through cycles of wet conditions that produced ephemeral lakes and streams in large expanses. These water sources manifested predictably in certain seasons, generating windows of opportunity for long-distance transport operations. Khafre's strategists not just knew of these seasonal patterns, but based their whole operation upon them. Shallow groundwater permitted the excavation of wells close to the quarry location, furnishing the water resources required for prolonged operations. Archaeological evidence indicates that these wells were designed with a sophisticated grasp of desert hydrology. Stone-lined shafts were sunk to specific calculated depths to tap underground water without causing cave-ins or pollution. The well construction shows geological sophistication that appears to be above that of ancient builders. Above all, Wadi Tushka, which is a seasonal stream that drains to the Nile, had sufficient water during flood seasons to float heavily laden boats. This natural transportation route was in existence only at particular periods of the year when the Nile flood waters overflowed into the desert valleys. The timing had to be exact, necessitating coordination by Khafre's planners between quarrying activity and hydrological cycles hundreds of miles away. Khafre engineers did not merely accommodate their environment. They structured their entire operation based on accurate knowledge of seasonal hydrology cycles. Their scheduling had to be immaculate, synchronizing quarrying activities with water levels, flood cycles, and transportation opportunities that existed only in certain seasons of the year. The degree of environmental forecasting involved implies meteorological sophistication that would not be systematically developed until modern days. Coordination becomes even more striking when in meticulous detail. Quarrying was necessary months in advance of the seasonal flood so that blocks could be prepared for shipment during the short periods when water levels were high enough. Work crews needed to be stationed at various points along the transportation route to accommodate transfers between modes of transport on land and water. Supply chains needed to transport food, equipment, and supplies over long distances with timing that allowed resources to arrive exactly when needed. The extent to which environmental planning was needed indicates that Khafre's civilization had weather and hydrological information already available that would not be equaled in Egypt for centuries. They had sophisticated understanding of complex interrelations between climate, water cycles, and transport logistics that enabled them to carry out projects across enormous distances. This information seems to have been specifically created for Khafre's works and disappeared entirely after his death. Climate history indicates that the climatic conditions in which Khafre's works were feasible prevailed for only a limited time. Previous and subsequent dynasties would have been unable to carry out corresponding projects since the water sources required for them did not exist during their respective periods of domination. This indicates Khafre's designers were knowledgeable about long-term climatic trends and planned their undertakings to capitalize on peak conditions that prevailed only in his particular era. This environmental expertise becomes even more unsettling when it is paired with indications of their construction prowess.